now that it looks like Harriet Tubman is going to kick Andrew Jackson off the $20 bill, it would be useful to examine Harriet Tubman's place in American history and how her actions really led very directly to the Civil War and the ultimate abolition of slavery. The Civil War was not about slavery in the South. It was not even about the expansion of slavery into the West. It was essentially about the spread of slavery to the North. The Dred Scott decision by the Supreme Court made it clear that when a owner brought his slave into a free territory, the slave remained a slave and was not entitled to freedom. And that if a slave escaped, it was like stolen property, and the owner could himself or hire troops and soldiers to go after the missing property, the slave. And the North came increasingly to feel that not only would slavery never be ended in the South and be extended to some of the new states in the West, but that it would infiltrate the North, because Dred Scott seemed to want to spread slavery into the North. Now, what made that decision particularly rankling to the North was that the various compromises, particularly the Compromise of 1850, provided the Fugitive Slave Act, which said that fugitive slaves could be hunted down in the North and returned, and that people who came upon fugitive slaves in the North were obliged to turn them in. And if they didn't, they themselves were guilty of a crime, kind of like abetting a larceny or something like that. And that really the issue was joined because Harriet Tubman helped establish the Underground Railroad that led 100,000 of the 5 million slaves in the U.S. to escape to freedom. It almost cleaned out many of the slave plantations, particularly in Virginia and Kentucky, border states where you could get, or Maryland, where you could get over the border to free territory with less difficulty. The escapes from Mississippi and Alabama were, of course, more problematic and rarer. But as Harriet Tubman's operation built up more and more slaves in the North seeking freedom, many went to Canada, but the ones that stayed in the United States, it created a fairly significant fugitive slave population. And when Dred Scott came down and the Fugitive Slave Act was included in the Compromise of 1850, it set up a friction that really led to the Civil War. There are many, many instances of Southern slave catchers going after a slave, and a Northern riot taking place of abolitionists trying to stop them and trying to protect the free black slave. And it was the intrusion of slavery into the North that galvanized Northern sentiment to a point where it would not entertain any compromise with the South. And the South's view was that as long as the North was not obliged to help enforce their slave laws in northern states, it was a perpetual sieve that would drain their slave populations and indeed encourage slave insurrections. So Harriet Tubman played a key role in making slavery a Northern cause, not just an effort to stop it from expanding or to get rid of it in the South. And she's earned her place on the money. Thanks a lot.